taking a little bit of a different stance today. Just everybody know that there's dogs there. Anyway, so normally I go into the office so that you don't have to hear a potential dog barking, but I'm trying to be downstairs since my son's at camp and my husband's in the office. Figure like different environment, but I'm so glad that you're all here. And this is a topic that I find personally very interesting. But before I get started, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm going to share my screen so you can see this while I talk. And then we'll get started. So my name is Lisa Zimmerman. I'm a health coach, a personal trainer, a yoga instructor, and a meditation teacher. And I do this within my own practice where I work with clients. And then I also provide these services in a concierge medical practice underneath a physician. So it's a physician-led practice, MD. And then I also teach a lifestyle medicine selective to third and fourth year medical students at Stony Brook. And lifestyle medicine is basically what I follow as a coaching methodology, and it's what I follow personally in my own life, which is looking at the different pillars of what wellness is. And we almost look at it as spokes on a wheel, maybe on a bicycle wheel. But when you think about it, you want deep restorative sleep. So you want adequate sleep, positive social connections, which we all see now how important that was in the last 18 months. Predominantly plant-based eating. And I know I hear this term all the time. It's a whole other topic, but meaning just try to eat food that is nourishing, that you enjoy, that you can tolerate, that is less processed and less manufactured, and more whole. And then just have a moderate way of looking at it. So also movement and risky substances, avoiding of them, some smoking and alcohol to some degree, which we see has increased. And overall, just reducing stress. So these are the pillars. And so that's what we may touch on as we go through this. And that is my background. So I do want to get started, and hopefully you'll be able to see my screen. If you'd like to chat, you're welcome to. If you have a question that's burning, no worries, you're welcome to do that. If not, just keep it to the end. What I'd like for you to do though is get some pen and paper. Sometimes when you write something down, you're able to remember it and make sure that it's something that maybe you implement, that you have curiosity about. So it could be further reading of something that we talk about tonight or today afternoon. It could be that there's a tip that you picked up and you want to actually try it out. So if you write things down, you're more likely to remember them. That's why in school, we were always told to take notes. And at the end, if you do pick something, I'd like to hear about it. I mean, you know, if you pick one tip, that's fantastic. All right, so we're going to talk about lifestyle change just for a moment. And I'm speaking of myself and when I changed my lifestyle. So that was in my 20s and 30s. I was very much a typical cookies in the morning and then like chili dog from 7-Eleven, you know, in the afternoon, not really paying much attention to food. But, you know, as I grew and got into this career, I see when we are practicing those pillars of lifestyle, we are healthier overall. We have more natural energy. So there's less of that reliance on sugar and caffeine, which can definitely be like a little bit of a roller coaster. And the sugar cravings become reduced. So that's a really important thing. But today, what we're going to cover is talking really simply about sugar in its many forms, what insulin does in your body, what addiction is, so the actual, you know, what the actual definition of addiction is, and then some strategies that you can use to lower sugar consumption if you feel like that's something that you're interested in doing. So basically, sugar is a molecule. I'm sorry if I'm giving anybody flashbacks to chemistry, but basically, this is just how it looks. It's its molecular structure, and it has carbon and hydrogen and oxygen in various levels. And that's why we call it a carbohydrate. And it's found in most plants. So a lot of people think, oh, sugar, it's in cookies. It's in your tomatoes and your cucumbers and your avocados. It's in everything. And that's not a bad thing. And it's really found in high concentrations in sugarcane and sugar beets. So that's why we call it sugarcane and sugar beets. And a lot of the sugar that we buy or eat, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's just, it comes from either sugar cane or sugar beet, and you will see that on the package. But a lot of people don't realize that we have this beet as a crop that makes things sweet. So sugar is commonly found in a lot of food, whether it be a tomato or whether it be a Pop-Tart. So it's in everything. And some of these words you may have heard before. Corn syrup, basically what that means, it's made from corn, and it's usually about 100% glucose. Sometimes it's a little less, but it's a form of glucose. Then you have galactose, which is found in dairy. And then you have lactose, which is also found in dairy. I'm lactose intolerant. That doesn't mean I'm allergic to milk. It means that I don't have the enzyme to break down that sugar called lactose. So I just stay away from dairy-free products. They don't like me. Fructose, that's found in fruit, honey, and root vegetables. So we're thinking carrots, parsnips, rutabaga, turnips, all those winter vegetables. And basically, the way you can think about it is that when they use fructose or high fructose corn syrup, it's added to a lot of foods and beverages, and they make it in a crystalline form. So cornstarch is added to it. So it has that like crystals look. So when you look at it, you see little sugar crystals. And so fructose makes up about half sugar in sucrose and high fructose. A lot of people ask me, is agave okay? Because it is, it's got fructose in it. And I say, really, it doesn't seem to have any effects, but if you have, liver issues, just remember it's metabolized in the liver. So if you have some kind of like non-alcoholic fatty liver disease or your liver function tests they always recommend to find another sweetener. Maltose, found in molasses, sucrose, that's our table sugar. Sugar alcohols, so they're not a sugar and they're not an alcohol. You probably may have heard of Lencanto or erythritol or monk sugar, monk fruit. That is one of these various alcohols. It's erythritol. And what happens is it makes things sweet, but it doesn't have a effect on blood sugar levels. So a lot of people will use it. All right, so we talked a lot about sugar and its various forms, and we know that it is a form of quick energy in our body. Our brains are pretty greedy. They like 20% of the glucose circulating. So how do we get that into our body, and how do we get this? We do it via insulin. So insulin's a hormone, and it almost like connects with the sugar molecule and says, hey, let's go and transport you into some cells, into some muscle cells or wherever. And what happens is it's a lock and a key, and it binds, and it's able to transport inside the cell the sugar, the glucose, and it gets stored inside your cells. So your cells do a lot of work. It also gets stored in your liver it's made into glycogen, which is something you use, like let's say you go sprint, you use that up rapidly. It's like a quick form of energy. It also helps take that excess glucose and turn it into fat and put fat into the cells and fat into tissue, etc. So insulin is important because if you didn't have insulin and you started to eat a Pop-Tart or whatever, a tomato, you would not be able to get it into the tissues in your body, and then your blood glucose would rise. And when it gets too high, that becomes dangerous. So really, simple sugars require very little digestion. So think of like a dripping of a faucet versus putting the faucet on and a very large bolus of water is coming out. It's the same thing with how we eat things. So what happens is when you do eat just a Pop-Tart, a banana, whatever, your pancreas is not designed to say, oh, let me detect the amount of glucose. It just overshoots. It just secretes out an amount. And you can see that in this particular chart here, that people eat Coca-Cola, and the amount of blood sugar in milligrams per deciliter on the left, and on the bottom row is time. So you can see what 2 poached eggs does to a person's glucose, not very much. But then when you get into Coca-Cola, the red line, it spikes and then it dips down even lower. So then you get this bottoming out, this drop, this hypoglycemia. And then when you look at the green, which is the instant oatmeal, there's a peak, but then there's a slow digestion, a slowing down. It's not a crash because you still do have fiber from the oatmeal. So basically that's what this is. So the insulin can overshoot and that blood sugar can be really low 1 to 2 hours later. So insulin's important and having it at balance is really important too. So a lot of people say to me, I skip breakfast, which is okay. And then I started to feel sick, like nauseous. I'm like, well, that's hypoglycemia. And then they felt this adrenaline surge because your body's trying to keep you alive. So then they get nervous and they get irritable. So it's important, outside of all the science of this, is when you eat a meal, make sure it's balanced. Make sure you have protein, fat, and fiber. And that it may take you, doing some Pinterest or whatever it is. I can make some suggestions, but to see what that kind of plate will look like. Because remember, you want that protein and the fat to balance and the fiber to balance out the sugar. And that's really, really important. So sugar, we talked about insulin. Is it addictive? Well, for that, we have to really talk about what addiction is and what some of the components that might be similar or completely different. So it is my opinion that sugar is not addictive, but we crave it intensely. I did work in addiction research for 4.5 years at Brookhaven National Lab, working with wonderful human beings, volunteers. And so this is my opinion, and it's based on what I've been reading, what I know about this area, is that tastes really good. Sugar's awesome. It's compelling. It's in everything. It makes me happy. I don't really care about chips. It's just wonderful. It's enjoyable. It's also added to a lot of foods. So it shows up in places that we don't necessarily realize it's going to be there. The other thing is, I'm making the statistic up, I'm not quite sure, but I think we're not supposed to have more than 25 grams a day, but it's hidden in so many different places. And personally, I'm not going to sit here and do that calculation. Using sugary foods, many of us will use it in ways that aren't the healthiest way. A lot of coping and maladaptive, coping, especially the last 18 months, is using food to soothe ourselves. And sugar is wonderful for that. It's really, really quite good at that. But that doesn't mean it's an addiction. So we definitely crave, and that is a component of addiction, but we crave sugar. But we don't really lose control and eat more than planned. But there is a particular disorder where that may happen, and we'll talk about that. So there is craving, and so that kind of matches up with it. This is from Dr. Rita Goldstein. She's a clinician I used to work with, and this was her model. It's called ERISA, for what addiction is and what it looks like. And it includes intoxication, binging, withdrawal, and craving. We talked about craving. So craving is, we all know what craving is. We don't have to go into it. Don't worry about attention bias. It just means what you're thinking about. Well, I'm craving some water. I'm craving, Oreos. Intoxication is where the person in the addiction cycle becomes impaired and they lose their sense of awareness. And that's not something we see with food, but we will see that with methamphetamine, maybe and sometimes with marijuana, alcohol, crack cocaine, heroin, etc. Then there's the binging phase in addiction, which is the loss of control. And that can happen in a specific eating disorder that I'll mention in a moment after that. And then there's the withdrawal. So the person feels a lack of motivation. They don't feel pleasure. They feel like crap. Maybe something triggers them. And then they go right back into the cycle of the craving. So this is a little bit different than food versus, drugs, but food as a drug. So addiction versus what we could call this is behavioral habituation, which is, to me, better because it's more empowering than thinking like, oh, now I have to go to, if we say sugar is addicting, then what are we going to start having rehabs for them? And it's going to have to be covered on health insurance. It doesn't seem like that's really where this should go. So the thing is there is behavioral habituation, which is different than addiction. And binging occurs when junk food is around us. I mean, everybody, including myself. So there's this behavior that's being driven by sweet tasting, highly palatable foods. And there's a theory that is due to our ancestry and our heritage prior to having agriculture, prior to farming, that we were hunters and gatherers. And so finding something sweet was a sign that there was a lot of nutrients and energy. And so that could have been like a beehive or something, but you didn't have, you know, Pop-Tarts and stuff readily available. So that was something that was meant you were going to get instant energy, and that's why it was palatable. And so the thing with the binging, though, is that it's not the neurochemical effects of sugar, it's that it tastes really good. It's that we've created a habit. The neurochemical effects of crack cocaine or methamphetamine or heroin are much more compelling than, you know, what we might say sugar makes a person do. So tolerance, we talked about that, needing more. Yes, we could definitely feel that way with food, but it's not to the point where we're doing it because we want to be intoxicated. Maybe we want to feel satiated, but we're not looking to feel intoxicated. A withdrawal. So binge eating disorder, we were doing a study, this is like several years ago, decades ago, but it was basically binge eating disorder. What does it mean? It is a person who eats to the point of eating large volumes of food, and they get, so an example is we had a participant who had like 6 boxes of spaghetti and 6 cans of or 6 jars of sauce. So it was very, very mass quantities of food, and you know, it does get out of control and they feel like they've lost control over it, and that's considered an addictive behavior. But outside of that, it's nice to know that we have some power and that we don't have to, you know, go get some medical treatment for it. So thinking about withdrawal, though, back to addiction is, you know, if I tell you stop eating chocolate, you might be disappointed, but you're not going to, you know, be like banging on someone's door at night because you need it. It's not as compelling. Realistically, we really can't compare a person detoxing from a substance of abuse, a substance that they're using, like alcohol, compared to not having food. That's more of like having sustenance to function. It's one versus the other. They're very, very different. So the other thing is time commitment. You have people in your family who did suffer from addiction, then you'll know that often they would spend a lot of their time not doing things that were good choices for them, but seeking. The thing is that junk food is readily available. You know, you go to Old Navy, there's candy at the checkout. Libraries sometimes have cafes. I mean, we definitely have a food abundancy, which is, you know, a blessing and a curse. But it doesn't create impairment. Food doesn't really create impairment outside of that one eating disorder. It doesn't usually make it so that a person can't work or drive or care for their family. So that is another reason we can kind of debunk that. Neurological issues, there's no neurological impairment. So it's not like we are going to test a person to see if they're neurologically impaired, have them walk a line. Food doesn't intoxicate. So think about the word intoxicate. Intoxicate means like the brain shuts down, that executive function, that prefrontal cortex, that decision-making part of the brain shuts down or doesn't function, but food doesn't do that the way cocaine or other drugs of use will. So what's the issues with sugar? You know, if we're having this discussion about sugar and we're just saying, okay, it's not addictive, well, okay, but there are issues with it. It's in a lot of these drinks that a lot of people will drink, and the problem is they have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and more and more and more sugar in it. Remember, there is a limit that we want to have per day, and give or take. And so what happens is it displaces solid food. And so the person who's drinking these is not satiated, is not their blood sugar is not balanced, and they're not satiated. They now are just having there's no fiber, there's no protein, there's no fat, it's just going straight through them, quickly metabolized. And we know where that goes. We saw the peaks in insulin and glucose in those other slides. The other thing is that sugar in its forms, it's most likely either going to be sugar cane or it's going to be sugar beets. What happens with sugar, it is very heavily marketed, like many other things, like tobacco in the past. And it is easily available. We have a culture where food is very easily available. We have abundancy, mostly, not everywhere in this country, but we do generally. And so sugar definitely creates habit. There's a lot of it in the food, so getting used to reading labels is really important. I was surprised to pick up a yogurt and there was like 28 grams of sugar in it. But yet, like, the way it was marketed and branded was it was healthy. So I was like, okay, I mean, it's okay to eat that once in a while, but somebody doesn't understand that maybe they're not feeling well and they're crashing after eating that an hour later. It was just interesting. So sugar can be used to comfort. You know, you can keep your chips. I would rather comfort myself with sugar. Consuming sugar, over and over again, habitually will increase the desire for it and decrease your ability to reduce the cravings. So it's not like you have to, unless this is your personality, do a complete reduction in sugar, or maybe you can just kind of back away from it and add a little bit more in other areas. We talked about portions and the way they are now. Another issue is that sugar intake, when it's very high, could mean that the particular person is not eating well in other areas of their life because they are consuming products, filling themselves up, and that doesn't leave a lot of room for nutrient-dense whole foods, which is what supports health and wellness. We talked about that. So also realize that a lot of the vitamins and minerals and water and fiber and phytonutrients are not in a bottle of an energy drink, which I drink occasionally, but I see a lot of people drinking them 3, 4, 5 times a day because they don't have any energy. So they use this energy drink that helps them crash, and then it starts all over again. All right, so how do you rein in cravings? Well, a lot of lifestyle in regards to food and cooking is about skill power, not so much about willpower, because willpower is a muscle and it gets fatigued. Just like if I'm going to go do bicep curls, I'm going to have a limit on sets and repetitions that I can do. So it's really a finite resource. It gets worn down. It charges up again, but that's just the reality of what happens. So it's really about developing skills for some people around navigating food, knowing that it needs to be in their life, but they need to navigate in a way that supports their health. So for some people, not everybody, but eating 4 to 5 hours is a good way to go. That hunger that can come on can lead to, like we talked before, irritability, fatigue, mood swings, and that is because of the crash of insulin and also the adrenaline surge when the person becomes hypoglycemic. And then we know that it gets followed by more sugar cravings. The other thing is that dehydration can really show up as hunger for sweets. I have had many people tell me when I recommended they just try to drink more, say that really made a difference for them. And they didn't even realize they were thirsty until they started to drink more. So tip for the day, if you want to, you can put 4 rubber bands on a bottle or a cup, and every time you drink 1 cup, you pull the rubber band off, put it on your wrist. It's just a good way to start. All right, so I get a lot of questions about this, so I like to answer this up front. This is my opinion, that you can avoid skipping breakfast, or you don't have to, or you can eat breakfast. It's really about you and your environment. So first of all, most breakfast research has been done by breakfast manufacturers, which isn't a bad thing, but you kind of wonder if there's a bias. Anyway, so if you're somebody who's not hungry in the morning and you feel good, and then you skip breakfast and you've brought food with you, or where you're going to be getting a meal so that you're not angry and irritated, and you have access to food, not a vending machine, then skip breakfast. But is the hunger coming on in a way that you are slowly feeling like, hey, I could eat something, or are you just all of a sudden like hangry and raring to go? The reason I mention this is because for some people, they can skip breakfast. They've have access to food and they're fine at skipping the breakfast. And for some people, if they skip breakfast, they are hungry within an hour, and then they don't have anything to eat, and then they have to wait till 12 o'clock. So you have to figure that out. Try to eat less refined carbs. So everybody's talking about carbs are good, carbs are bad. That's a whole other lecture, but I don't think that food is good and bad. I think that food is nourishing or not so nourishing, and it's a snack and it's fun. So cereals, pastries, bagels, instant oatmeal, I eat all of them, but that's not, it's my healthy is my default, but I still have fun or junk food or whatever you want to call it, but it's not bad. Okay, another thing is for people who are craving, so we're touching about this pillar in the lifestyle medicine wheel here, is that people are not getting adequate sleep. So I'm talking between 7 and 9 hours. Some people can do a little bit less. There's supposedly genes related to that. I don't know a lot about it. However, having adequate sleep is really, really important, and people need to guard their sleep, because it seems like from talking to a lot of people, it is a 3 to 5 hour amount of sleep. So when you're tired, when you're stressed, your body is going to crave glucose, and you're going to want to get that glucose quickly. An apple is not like enticing in that situation. So what happens is cravings come. A lot of people are going to bed late, or they're waking up early, or they're getting up in the middle of the night. And so going on for months on ends can really wear down how a person feels. And it has an effect also on their overall general health. So just keeping that in mind, creating a good sleep for yourself. You can rein in cravings by just being present with yourself. So you basically feel like you're rummaging through the cabinets, or you're going in the kitchen and you're opening the refrigerator and you're looking for something. You could just step into yourself for a moment, just be completely present and say, what is it that I really want right now or need, or what happened prior to me feeling this, and maybe that, someone just annoyed you, who knows? So if you do decide that there's something that you really want to enjoy and you crave it, enjoy it and be mindful about it. Really engage with the smell and how it looks, and how it tastes, and just enjoy that food. And when you take that pause, and this is kind of from the mindfulness aspect of lifestyle medicine, but when you do take that pause, you become aware and you become free to really decide if this is something that you actually want. All right, so just to close with some more things that you can do, some more strategies that you can do from a food perspective. So obviously there's a mindfulness perspective, there's an education perspective, there is an awareness about the environment, and now it's like, well, what can I eat that might help tap down some of those cravings? And so what I have to say is you really need to kind of figure out what's in your kitchen right now. I don't believe in living in either extreme. I'm somewhere in the middle. So I'm definitely someone who's closer to the pile of produce over there, but I use these convenience foods, or these yummy snacks, or these fun foods, or just it's food, to fill in areas that work for me and work for my family. So just to be aware, though, that some of the foods that are back on there on the right can increase cravings, because we talked about this before. We talked about how eating more sugar leads you to wanting some more sugar. It leads to those cravings. So right now, I don't know, you can get winter vegetables. I know I've seen them in stores. Yes, beets for me, carrots for me, maybe potatoes. I think winter squash, I'll wait. But these are very nutrient dense, starchy, beautiful, good carbs. I hate the word good. I'm so sorry about that. How about just not fast carbs, slow burning carbs, nourishing carbs, and even these whole intact grains. Again, if you like the food, if you can tolerate it, if you have intolerances, you're allergic to something, or you don't like something, then you don't eat it. But those intact grains happen as well. The reason is these do have glucose, they have sugar, but it's slow. There's a matrix. So think of an apple. An apple has a matrix, a foundation of fiber, right? So you're crunching into that apple. That's that fiber. So when you're eating nutrient dense whole foods, nuts, seeds, peas, broccoli, carrots, whatever, you are getting the protein. There's actually protein, fat, and fiber, and it's a slow release of glucose. So it's slowly dripping into your bloodstream rather than this huge bolus, this huge mass, so to speak, of sugar being dumped into your digestive tract and then into your bloodstream. So you got to think about it that way, and that's the point of these whole foods. Okay, so lastly, really think about choosing low glycemic foods throughout the day, throughout whatever you're cooking or whatever you're gardening or whatever you're growing. And, you know, you're not going to be surprised looking at this chart here. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Low glycemic, you know, we're going from apples to nuts, seeds. You know, these are all nutrient-dense whole foods. And then things that are high glycemic shouldn't surprise us, you know, because there's a lot of, there may be equal amount of sugars between some of these products, so to speak, but it's the way that the sugar is titrated into your bloodstream, whether something is a, like I said, that big, you know, faucet opening of glucose or a slow drip, 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 drip. And so, of course, the cookies and candies and soda and alcohol will contribute to a immediate rise in blood sugar, which is not what we'd like to happen. But it's not about extremes. It's about figuring about one thing that you learned about that maybe you want to continue using the library to enrich and educate yourself, or maybe there's a tip you learned, you know, that's great. And what I would say to you is that if you find yourself in that position, and hopefully you'll share if you do, is that you really want to think about the law of diminishing intent, which reminds me of the law of diminishing return, but that's accounting. But basically what this means is that the longer you wait to do something that you should do right now, the greater the odds that you will never actually do it. And so we all have examples in our life about this. You know, it could be you put on workout clothes for the morning and then, you know, check your email first, which is something I've done. Or, you know, we just all have ways of kind of doing this to ourselves. So if there's something you're, you know, super interested in, just follow up as soon as possible. Don't put it away to the side, because it's just that law of diminishing intent. So anyway, I hope that you got as much as possible from this presentation. I appreciate all of you for being here. I love sharing science and then just trying to share like lifestyle and you know, lifestyle medicine ways to implement things that sometimes we would like to do, but we just are not always capable of. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing the screen if I can. Hold on a second. And I'd love to see, I'm having my cursor's acting weird, sorry. I'd love to see how all of you and see how you're doing. Hi, Jacqueline, Steve. Hello, everyone. So if anybody has any questions, I'm gonna check the chat. Okay. Don't dopamine lie? Yes. So I love that you brought that up. So don't dopamine levels rise when we eat sugary foods? Yes. And I love it because my boss's boss was Nora Volkow from Brookhaven National Lab. And that was her area of research, and it was fascinating. But you know what else goes up when we consume it? Reading a book, looking at a newborn, looking at your dog, beautiful flowers. So we all get a hit of dopamine to the brain in the reward system. And the reward system is a group of brain structures where this happens. And so yes, you're right, but there's a lot of things that give us reward that are not unhealthy. So yeah, it's the amount, and part of it is the amount of the surge. So imagine a person's brain on cocaine and a person's brain on chopping onions or reading a book, right? So that's part of the reason. I hope that makes sense to you. Yeah, please, if you want to unmute yourself.
Anyone have any questions? That was great. I'm glad we recorded it because who's this? I can't take myself off of mute. Who is this?
Yeah.
I asked the question.
Yeah, please unmute yourself, ask questions.
So sometimes I don't want to, I'm not saying this to argue with you, it's just more to kind of understand this. So my understanding is like let's say something like marijuana. Okay, so people smoke marijuana, you know, you also get dopamine and endorphin rush, right? So there's no real chemical dependency though. You just
nope.
So that,
Right.
but people will
Except for the
talk
binge
about-
eating disorder person, that particular disease state, I hate calling it that, I'm so sorry. That particular person suffering from that is on the addiction side of food.
So my question is more like this. So they say that you know, you can be addicted to marijuana, blah blah blah. I'm on the fence of that, and I don't know enough about it to really, you know, give an expert opinion.